I attached myself to like the idea of witchcraft and like New Ageism when I was young, when I was in that tumultuous teenage time of my life, because I wanted answers. I wanted a way to express myself and my spirituality that felt true to me. And so I can relate if people are looking for that now. When I look back on that time, like I clung to those things so strongly because I just wanted to be able to say something when I didn't have a lot of voice and agency.
Yeah.
And like that's what tools like this do. Like it gives you those opportunities to be vulnerable without sacrificing vulnerability.
Prochaine station.
LOWKEY MTL.
Very white city.
What is it called?
Burlington.
Oh, Burlington, yeah.
If anybody here knows.
Yeah.
Burlington, Ontario, that is where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like anybody would agree. It's like a very, very wonderful, very safe. Like it was a great place to grow up, but there weren't a lot of people, I guess, who either came from like a mixed race background,
Okay.
who had like an Asian background. Like
Interesting.
that was more of the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm focusing so much, and like we'll talk about this later, like in my new books and my characters on like Filipino mythology, because I felt like for the beginning of a lot of my life, I was never Filipino. I was always Asian because I was like the only Asian person like around.
I have cousins that are half Sri Lankan, half Swedish, and in Sweden they're considered black.
Yeah,
But
like that's just it.
They
like,
look Mexican. Like they don't even look like mulatto.
yeah, like
It's just funny. It's funny.
it's kind of crazy, and like I didn't think about it when I was younger because I'm like, yeah, I'm Asian, but then like that became my identity.
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, it wasn't like actually my identity because I was Filipino. I was just considered Asian.
Yeah, it's such
like
a
broad
like an
term.
overall term. But I feel like nowadays with like the internet and like just the access to like information, people are becoming more and more aware of things like that.
Oh no, for sure. Like I don't think it would happen the same way now, and I definitely think the city's much more diverse than like when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I toured McGill. The school was beautiful. It looked like a fairy tale. I was like, this is like academia dreams. Like in my very, very naive young life when I was like, I'm going to be a professor. I'm like all of the old buildings and the libraries. I'm like, this is where I have to be.
So how did it go from like professor to like content?
It was a mixture of things. I always say if I had all the money in the world, I'd go back to school. And that's like still true. If I was like wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, I'd probably still go and get, I'd still go and get a PhD.
In what?
Oh, in English.
Okay.
Or creative writing. Like it would be like, I'd still follow that track. But
So like to me, it seems like your overall thing is to be like an author and like a writer.
oh, for sure. Endgame.
That's
Like-
your endgame. Okay.
Like even if I only make it when I'm 60, I'm okay with that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, like I feel like the timeline of things are very like specific to the person. you
Yeah.
know? You've always wanted to be a writer. And how did it like go to like Filipino mythology? Like how did it go to that out of everything? Is it
Well-
a part of your like whole identity seeking?
A little bit, yeah. Like I wanted to learn more about like where my mom came from and like, because I mean, her and her sisters and like my grandmother, like my whole family left there at a really tumultuous time. My grandmother was so intent on like having us have a better life here. At the time, my grandfather was still working security for the president and he had to go back to the Philippines. There was like back and forth. So the family kind of split and my mom grew up with my grandmother and her sisters in Toronto. And so I feel most of her, I guess, trauma from that experience is more around not having my grandfather around and around, like at the time, like single mother, immigrant, like did not speak English. Like they had to work really, really hard. And my mom now, you can kind of see it in, like, she loves nice things. Like she loves to like treat herself. Like she always tried to give us like the best of everything.
Yeah.
Cause like she knows the difference of what it was like having to work so hard for everything.
Yeah. They're more just grateful for like being outside of the Philippines, right?
Exactly.
So your day to day, like, what's your position called?
I am the senior manager of content and localization, which sounds very businessy.
Did you make that, like, did you have a part of, okay.
I didn't. They actually reached out to me, which was really cool. But this was like a really rare move in my career where like, and this is also another reason why it's probably like, you can cut this part out from now on. So like off the record. This was a really rare move for me because it was a great opportunity to be a people manager, which is something that like so long ago, I never would have foreseen for myself. Like I wouldn't have thought that like I have a passion for mentoring, coaching, like inspiring, I guess, like trying to, I guess, support and help people. And I didn't realize that I could do that through like being a manager or like being a boss. That's but cool. I found it really rewarding. And I mean, the team is a lot bigger than I initially thought. I initially thought I'd be managing 40 people. I manage more like 60-ish, probably going on 100 next year.
Are you managing a bunch of different teams of people?
Yeah.
So like what kind of teams are you working with? Like a content team, I'm assuming?
It is the content team.
Okay.
But it's like we work on a production basis for like product descriptions and like newsletters and emails and marketing. We pretty much do everything, but it's across 5 languages.
Oh.
So I'm the manager of 5 different languages.
Just the languages part?
Well, that's like the whole content production part.
Oh, okay.
So like the entirety of content in English, French, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean.
Okay, so content like writing wise.
Yes. Like if you went onto our website, 90% of what's written on the website is written by people on my team.
Okay. So because when I hear content, I'm thinking about like videos and like
no.
content.
This is like
copyright.
True copywriting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so that is pretty in line with like being an author and like writing a book.
It is, but I also really haven't done much writing since I've arrived. Like a lot of my day is just like meetings, coaching, strategy, like workshops.
I remember you mentioning that too, like the being in a position where you can kind of like oversee everything and just like guide people is like way more rewarding than to just like have to do like the work itself.
Well,
like, you know what I mean?
I will say for me, like I wouldn't say that for everyone because I do think that there's like a huge value to senior individual contributors, like people who can perform like at a really high level and in their skill set, in their creative, like that don't need to manage people.
Right.
Because I don't think that like growth should be dependent on whether or not you can be a good manager. Just because I feel like that's how we get a lot of bad managers is getting people who are super skilled but not great with people. Or, yeah. So
yeah, it's true.
My passion for like supporting and growth and like I really approach this as being an opportunity where I'd be able to help a lot of people. Like I'd be able to impact a lot of people. And so far, 2 months in, it has not disappointed. I feel like I've been really there fixing problems, making people's lives easier, has been difficult. It's been a weird switch because there's like a huge shift between when you manage direct reports and you have like that rapport, like we had that like super transparent. It's just like, I know what's going on. Like we chat, like really, really easy. And then when you become the manager of managers and then those managers are managing other managers and other like leads.
Yeah. But that was like a thing at Lightspeed too, right? Like there's so many levels that after a certain point, like there's like a disconnect. Like you're not really communicating after a certain point, you know? Kind
of, yeah. Like I need to be so aware. And this is what like my new boss has honestly been a really wonderful mentor. Like I've really appreciated his advice because I didn't realize when I joined that every single thing I say and every action I do and who I talk to and when I talk to them and like the relationships that I form are going to be so, I guess, like scrutinized, like on different levels. And if I say something, it's going to trickle down rather than me just saying it directly. Because like when I worked with you, it was so direct. Like I'd say something, you'd get it. If you were confused, you'd talk to me. But now I'm like making decisions for a department. I'm like talking to managers who then talk to their teams.
But it's crazy. Isn't like the answer to that transparency as well? Or do you think like transparency in a situation like that could like kind of like fuck things up?
It really depends because in situations like this, like I am as transparent as like I can possibly be, but at this new level of management, if I say one wrong thing, then it's going to erase all the other good things that I might have said.
Yeah, they're going to focus on that part. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the way I communicate is so important now because I've got to be able to get through to people in a way that will get through to people through people.
Right. Yeah, so interesting.
And like, I honestly didn't think about it before. Like I was just like, oh yeah, like I'll form relationships, I'll manage people, like it'll be great.
I'm just gonna be genuine, it's fine.
But like,
you're still genuine. I'm not saying you're not genuine.
No. I know. Like
it's just like, you gotta,
I can't not be genuine at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
But like, it's so crazy just like walking around the office and then being like, oh yeah, like one person said Deanna said this. It's just like, oh, like I heard her talking about like this. Like,
okay.
Like knowing my words have weight is both something that like I take so seriously. Like I feel so honored to be in that position where I can have that kind of impact. And then like the stress of that is like so different from the kind of managing I was doing before, because like I know that my message is like, if I say it directly to you, maybe you understand like 80% of it exactly the way I think it, and then you're gonna like pass it on, and then like,
so the broken telephone part is like less broken telephony, right?
Yeah. So that's what my manager was telling me. He's like, you've got to be okay with like your message is not going to get through the exact way you want it all the time, and you've got to really work. Not that like he didn't say that I'm not good at it, but he said that like this is the job. Like you have to be an expert communicator.
Yeah, that's what it is, communication. That kind of relates to like, I guess, your writing, because you're technically communicating with people. So you said you got into Filipino mythology and you gave me like the whole background of your mom and stuff. So how did the Filipino mythology part come? Because like personally, I also recently learned that there's a lot of Hindu mythology.
Yes.
And I was like, what the
Which
hell?
Filipino mythology is very based on. There's a lot of
really?
Hindu roots. Yes.
That's what's cool. Because like when I was younger, I was like, there's only Greek mythology. That's like the only thing I heard about.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah. And then you start learning about your religion. And like I kind of delved deep into it because like a lot of Hinduism talks about like psychedelics and stuff. And like a lot of the sculptures are very like psychedelic art, you know? And like when I would talk to my mom about it, she'd be like, no, what are you talking about? Like, no. You just believe in God. There's like multiple gods. And I'm like,
don't question.
They just have like 6 arms. Like that's not a hallucination. Like, and then I learned there's like a thing called Hindu mythology, and I was like super interested in that. And I feel like every culture kind of has these like stories, because that was like their way of like preserving like data in a sense. Like history, you know?
I love the way you think about that. That is so cool. Like data preservation, of course.
But that's literally what it is. That was like a story would like stay in your head longer and like more accurately.
Yes.
Than just like, oh, this happened, this is what we learned from it, like pass this on, you know?
Oh no, like I'm obsessed with the study of stories, like in general, which is why mythology, like folklore, has always been something I love. Like I wouldn't consider myself a folklore expert because I haven't studied it formally. Like I don't have a degree in like folklore or anything like that, but
it was an intense focus. Is that a thing? Like a degree in okay. I didn't know that.
Oh no. It's like you can get different specializations. But I did have like an intense interest in it. And I love the way, and I've always been fascinated by the way stories affect people and the way that stories affect change. And communication is pretty much telling stories. Like the base of communication is being able to tell a story and understand the arc of a story. Even at its base, social media is like, you get the hook, the beginning, middle, end. Like you have that follow-up, you leave them hanging. Like all of that, and like the origin of stories really is folklore and mythology and religion, which encompass in like many different ways along with like history. And I mean, I did a lot of studies like also in like Greek mythology and Norse mythology. And I remember in one of the classes that I took, like this was one of the rare classes that didn't go into my degree, we were studying the Odyssey. Like you know the Odyssey, like Odysseus, like the trials, like et cetera, et cetera. We're also studying like some of like the different Greek histories and the way that they were written. And in those texts, the Greeks at the time would have considered it history. like as they were reading it. We consider it mythology now because they talk about the gods coming down to earth, arguing about XYZ.
Yeah.
Like, but at that time, that was kind of their fact because it was a lot of their religion, a lot of their belief. And as we've evolved, like we look at it as myth now, but there's so many things, and this is what I find fascinating, that like we are living in the folklore of our age and our beliefs are shaping what like thousands of years from now, people are going to study as being what we consider like imaginary stories.
Yeah.
Is our reality right now.
100%.
And that kind of ethos and looking at like folklore and like being able to see so many connecting dots, because like I'll find a creature in Filipino mythology and I'll be like, this is really interesting. It's a woman who is like beautiful by day. At night, her arms become bat wings. Her body severs itself. Like she hides her legs somewhere else and she goes out and she has like she's kind of like a succubus creature, like that, like sucks like out your entrails essentially. And I'm like, that's
entrails?
so
What do you mean by that?
like your insides.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like your organs. Yeah.
But those creatures are super similar to like if you go into like Babylonian and like Jewish mythology, like into the demon Lilith. That like Lilith has always also been like co-opted. It's like the mother of demons throughout like Jewish and like Catholic mythology. You'll hear of her as like Adam's first wife. Two separate sides of the world, like very, very different places that have very similar creatures.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that gets my mind going. Like,
yeah, actually, I was watching a documentary on Netflix recently. It's called, it's not Ancient Aliens, but it's, what was it? I forget the name of it. I'll like put it on screen when I edit this.
Just put it like
yeah. But he's basically like going against all of like anthropological like history so far, and he's like challenging all of this with like the pyramids and stuff. And
interesting.
He's saying how like these structures were built all around the world in different ways, and it's almost like this kind of goes like really far into like maybe like aliens are giving us this information. Not to go there, but like
that's cool. I feel like I am an Aquarius. We're gonna get down this road eventually. Like that's fine.
Exactly. So like he's basically just challenging what's already written, and he's getting a lot of shit for that because like people don't want to change history, obviously. But what's interesting is that he finds like similarities all around the world, almost like we had like one like access to like some kind of information, or like maybe it was like, you know, like birds like fly across to like another place when the seasons are changing. It could be like information like that, but like it's crazy how similar these structures are all around the world. I find that's really interesting. Like at a time where we weren't as connected, that there's like very similar things going around like all around the world.
I mean, like it connects to like a really interesting, but also like really base kind of like mythological religious fact is that like every culture has a flood story.
A flood story?
Yeah. Like, you know, like Noah's Ark, Great Flood.
Okay.
Every single culture has.
Yes. This was actually mentioned in the documentary I'm talking
Probably,
about.
yeah. Like that's like a kind of a base, like folklore mythological fact.
Yeah.
It is shocking how deep some of them go. But for me, it speaks to how we kind of process the human experience, and like that kind of the real raw truth of the human experience in how we all can unite around very similar things. Like every single culture has a flood story, probably because like different cultures experienced melting ice caps, tsunamis, like different, like what have you. Every single culture has a flood story. And whether or not it happened at the same time, whether or not we considered a flood the same thing, we all interpreted it in a very similar way. Like we saw it as the beginning of the world, like the beginning end of the world.
Yeah.
Like this was like the way we processed change. Like this was like God's wrath. Like this was like it's so interesting to see that we like there are so many flood stories that connect it to like the morality of good and evil also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like whether we deserve it or not. And like you can see that like that's always been like a thing, like that sense of justice, that sense of like, overarching power that's beyond our control, like what is in our control. Like these are things that have always been part of like the human experience when they're trying to explain what happens. And like that's like a very I guess, true emotion for me. And like, that's something that matters in storytelling. Like the fact that every single culture has a flood story is really fascinating. But the fact that almost every culture sees it as like the beginning of the world, the end of the world, like this growth, like we interpreted that in very similar ways, despite where we were around the world.
Yeah. So do you incorporate that in your stories?
I do not, but we've gotten on a tangent. The book I've written most recently, like my first book, that's called Bury the Moon, isn't necessarily just about Filipino mythology. I bring in different mythologies from Africa, like across Africa. I bring in different mythologies from like Jewish Babylonian. I brought in Irish Celtic, like Gaelic mythology. I brought in Filipino mythology. Of course, I brought in Greek and Roman mythology. Like,
what like gave you the idea to mix like mythologies like this? To show that
a little
similar?
bit of like the way my mind works, and then a little bit of Neil Gaiman is a huge inspiration for me as an author. His book American Gods is essentially about our belief in gods. Like us humans, our belief in gods fuels the existence of gods, and therefore when different communities immigrated into America, they brought their gods with them. And so the entire premise of American Gods is the gods of old, like old Nordic gods, Greek gods, like et cetera, like the gods that were brought to America, fighting with the new gods like technology and media and celebrity.
Yeah.
And like that idea of the way that like gods and mythologies overlap in the way that he used symbolism. Like, I don't think I do anything close to what he did. Like that is, I'm not saying I am him by any means, but.
You're saying he inspired you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I love kind of Easter eggs and being able to, like, I don't outright reference like each of the characters as being a representation of this god from this country. I kind of just threw them in there into my universe, but it's more of a like, if you know, you know. My main character's name is Selene. Selene is the moon god in Greek mythology. One of her friends in the book is named Amansanea. That is the water god of Filipino mythology. She has a friend named Bridget, who's a god in Celtic mythology, like a triple goddess of like ironwork and harvest.
So what does this universe look like? Like, do you have like, when you're writing about this stuff, do you have like a vision for like what these people look like, what this world looks like?
Oh yeah. There is a pantheon of gods, like all gods that just like exist.
What's the environment? I'm trying to picture the environment.
Oh, I set this because I really like 19th century Britain.
Yeah.
So like 19th century England, like London, is just so fascinating for me. I did a lot of studies like in my degree in like 19th century literature. So like Dickens and like all of the poets of the age, and that whole universe is just like really fun. And I also, because it's such a pain for writers, I wanted to write in a world or like at a time when there were no phones. Because right now, you'd be surprised how difficult it is for a plot in the information age, where like, how can you surprise a character with information in the information age? Like, it becomes very difficult. And I specifically specialize in like fantasy writing because of my...
Yeah, because I've never really read a lot of fantasy stuff. I've mainly read just like self-help books and like that whole thing.
I know.
So when you're saying like writing about getting information in an information age, you're saying like now books like incorporate like social media and stuff in their stories?
Books do. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But like...
I would never thought of that.
In my book, like my main character, Selene, like she is a debutante in like London, England. And I like to use it as a metaphor for like a gilded cage. Like it's a very simple metaphor. But the entire premise is that she's been lied to her whole life. She essentially looks like an alien. She has like glowing golden skin, white hair. Like the people around her, she sees like they have shadows around them, but nobody else notices. And like they see her, she sees them, but the humans around them can't see any of it. And her mother is a very strict, very abusive person who's told her that like, you cannot tell a soul. This is like you cannot ask about it. You cannot say anything about it. And she's tried, and like that's been met with like a lot of abuse. So she just lives as this kind of vain creature in this really gilded world, like where you go to balls and your image is everything, but she can't say anything true.
Right.
And so that relates to, like, I'm not spoiling anything because it's like a very quick turnaround within the book, that she finds out that her mother is not actually her mother. There's a huge revenge plot that's been going on since almost the beginning of time between the gods. Mm-hmm. She's become a victim of like a terrible vengeance that has happened in the past. Her memories have been taken away time and time again, so she has no idea who she is. And she has all this power that everyone's been trying to keep from her. So
is there like a philosophic like thing to this?
Oh, yeah. Like, I noticed halfway through, originally, I wanted to write a story about choice in the absence of choices.
Okay. Yeah.
Like somebody who's been given impossible stakes, somebody who doesn't have a lot of autonomy. And like, I thought like especially because I like the 19th century, a debutante would be a perfect example of this. Mm-hmm. And then in the book, my character is the product is kind of like an accident. Like she exists because of an accident in like one god trying to murder another and then creating two by mistake. Oh. So rather than killing, it like duplicated. Yeah. And so she became the byproduct of this like ancient hate and war. And the whole premise of the book, like at the beginning, is that she's trying to find her other half so that they can be whole again. But you go through it in her mind where she starts thinking, like, this is right. Like, I need to escape this horrible person who's done these horrible things to me. I need to find this person who's trapped and like is technically my other half. I don't know them, but they're suffering a great deal, and I should probably do something about that. But then she's always thinking, what does this mean for me? Do her memories, like, does her identity cease to exist when she becomes whole with this other person? Mm-hmm. What is she giving up? Is she giving up anything because she wasn't living much of a life anyways? Yeah. Everything, all of her memories had been planted at that point. Like everything she knew to be true was a lie. So does she have an identity to give up? Right. And so you see her struggle with that. I like that
because like from like when you just hear about like the idea of your book, mm-hmm. it seems like just like an entertainment thing. But I feel like there's so much like philosophy and like lessons to be learned from it, which like relates back to like how like old folklore stories were, right?
And I mean, it's based off the English folklore story from like the area of Lincolnshire called The Buried Moon. And in The Buried Moon, it's like the moon comes down to earth. She gets attacked by demons. The moon is buried. And then like humankind doesn't have a moon for months. And so the villagers go out, they rescue the moon, they free the moon from the demons, and it goes up into the sky. Mm-hmm. And I used that as a base, and then I made it far more complicated than it needed to be. But as I was writing this story, and I don't know why, like at the beginning, I knew I was obsessed with the idea of choice in the absence of choices. And like I kept writing, and like my friends were reading it along with me. And about 200 pages in, I went like to my friend who was my beta reader. Beta reader is like a first round of readers. Yeah. I had an epiphany. I was like, oh my God, Emily, I'm writing about my parents' divorce. And she's like, oh, I thought you knew. And I'm like, no, I didn't know. Mm-hmm. Like, in a way, like obviously like children of divorce handle things in different ways. Mm-hmm. And like, I love my mother, like I love my father. Like now that I'm
young when it happened?
12.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So like peak formative years.
Peak, like, who am I?
Yeah. So there was like a lot of like, I guess my parents obviously did their best to make sure that I had certainty in my life. Mm. And like, it's not like I blame them. Like now that I'm an adult, like I don't see them as evil. Like I don't see them as like whatever. But when I was younger,
for sure.
Angsty emo Deanna had a very different opinion of authority and parents. I remember going through a phase calling my mother my parental guardian, and she was so mad at me.
Instead of mom.
Yes. Like, parental guardian, are you saying I need to be home at this time? She's like, what the fuck is this? Like, where is my daughter?
Emo sassy Deanna.
Yes.
That's funny.
But like at that time, because like in my book, like the mother is like this vilified character who's like suppressing the daughter, and like the father figure that sparked this whole, like the mother figure is technically the goddess of darkness, like she is Lilith, and the father figure is the Persian god of the sun, Mithras. And ages ago, I made this all up, by the way, just so you know. So don't take this as like real mythology. I took characters.
It's like very creative.
I made it so that at the beginning of the world, like Lilith was like the darkness, she was the beginning. Mithras is like a star, the sun. They fell in love, couldn't have children, broke her heart. Like, she created demons as a way to have family. And he saw that as an abomination. And so he tried to extinguish that race, like, off the earth, like her race of demons.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting ensued. The Fates, which are kind of like the gods of destiny, intervened. They let Lilith keep the demons because they're like, you've been through enough. And Mithras, who was like enraged, was like, well, I want my thing. And they're like, okay. And so they took the shards of his broken heart and they created the moon. And when the moon was in the sky, it diminished demons' power. So it's almost like an insult to Lilith, his ex, that like the moon exists. And so that's where this great hatred stems from. That like ages ago, the moon came down to earth, and obviously like the moon, Selene, my character, was a symbol of everything that Lilith, this woman, just despised, like the source of all her anger and vengeance. And so that's why she like attacked her, like, et cetera, et cetera. At this point, I am giving a lot away about my book, but it'll probably be years before it comes out. So
I'm just trying to understand like how you came up with all these ideas. Like, what's your process? Like, how do you...
I am
are you one of those writers that like forces themselves to just like sit down an hour a day and just to like see what they come up with?
Yes.
Okay.
I am, but I also... It's like, it's a weird confidence thing, but I trust in my ability to make a story. There have been many times in my life where just like a friend and I, like, we'll just riff, like we'll talk, and like, you know, when you and a friend, like you have a bit.
Yeah.
Some of my friends and I,
writer as well?
Yeah,
okay,
like
right.
Some of my friends and I, like, we'll have a bit, and then we'll turn it into a plot, and then it'll become a backstory. Like, I'm very used to just like figuring out story ideas. And I mean, from first draft to what it looks like now, so different. Like that whole mythology and backstory I created halfway through, like...
It's just like a muscle, I find.
Yeah.
You just gotta work that muscle out.
Like it becomes a thing that like, as long as I can source it to a real emotion, something will come.
Okay.
And so like my main character, it was essential for me to put her in a situation where she would just not have options. And like anybody who's around her would have an agenda. And that the entire way the world was working wasn't necessarily against her, but it didn't allow her to be a person.
Yeah.
Like
it was already like pre-written of like what she's going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like she either stays with like an abusive kind of like godlike figure, or she forfeits her whole identity to become someone else in order to save someone else. And so where does that leave her in the interim?
Yeah.
And so like that, like, she still does it, like she still goes through with it, but I mean, I'm a huge romance fan, so of course, like this is not a this is not a teen book, this is an adult book, so
there's like romance within all of this as well.
Yes, romance, explicit content, what have you, love triangles, because that's just like, it's fun for me. Like,
and is the romance like helping her make the right decision?
I added a love triangle because I wanted to make it even more difficult for her.
Oh shit.
So like, the whole love triangle stems from, she has one person who is a demon, who is from like Lilith's world, but she's known for months. She's gotten to know, like, is her friend, like they have like a kind of frenemies situation going on. Like they have some chemistry, and like he met her as Selene. And then she has this heroic, amazing guy who's been trying to save her for the past 100 years because of what Lilith did when she severed the two gods in two. So like he fell in love with the moon when the moon first came to the sky. And ever since like Lilith's vengeance happened, like ever since that, like that terrible event happened that trapped like my main character in an awful situation, he's been trying again and again to rescue her. But the idea of who my main character is someone that he fell in love with like 100 years ago. It speaks to reality without actually making you have to suffer through reality.
Yeah.
Like,
but I find like all of this stuff just is like so much, like there's so much mind power that goes into like creating these stories. Like how do you manage your time with like a full-time job and being able to do this like on the side and writing a whole book?
Well, I mean, now I'm going to my second book, which I honestly think is much better than my first. So I'm really excited about that. But like I have to schedule out writing time. I schedule out time in the morning because I know if I do it at night, I won't stop. Like I'm the kind of person that if I sit and like I do it because this is my passion, like I won't eat, I won't sleep. Like
Yeah, you
My
just get
partner
the
needs to,
energy
like,
just comes to you. Yeah.
Mhm. So I try to do it in the morning so that I have a hard stop to myself. It doesn't always happen, but I tell myself I will at least think about my book and like progress in my creative, I guess, like throughput a little bit throughout the day. So does that look like writing? Does that look like just like thinking through the characters' motivations?
Do you
Like,
ever write things down? Like, do you ever get like a crazy idea? You write it down so you don't like forget about it.
my notes app is disgusting.
Notes app.
It's
That's what I was
like,
gonna ask you.
my notes app is like absolute hell.
Do you ever go back to your notes app and like try to figure out what you're trying to say at the time?
Oh yes.
And you're like, wait, what did I mean by this?
It's, oh my God, it's like, it's such a crazy process because it's in my process, like writers work differently. Like I need an outline, I need a plan, I need things to work. And at least the way I've worked so far, I don't like having an idea totally from scratch. I like basing it off of something that feels true. So like, for example, like the book I'm working on right now is based off an actual court trial, like a witch trial that happened in the Philippines in the 19th century.
A witch trial?
A witch trial, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Where, and this is crazy, like it's not like they were condemning her for being a witch, but the whole thing was that she was approached by a demon who was like, do you want to have the power to find lost things? Woman was like, yes. She turned it into a business. And then like it became a problem because like high ranking officials of state would be going to visit this woman who is being informed by a demon in like these seance like environments on like where they can find, where they can find like their lost horse or like their son or like stuff like that. And so at that point, because like Spain had colonized the Philippines, like Spain had to intervene because they were like, okay, we can't have the mayor of the town consulting like a 22-year-old woman who hears things from a demon. And so the entire court trial is like that real account of people talking about, yes, like when I went, like the demon told me that. I try to give myself like small goals.
But you never burn out?
Oh, I always burn out. I function at a very high level of anxiety.
Okay. I guess it works for some people.
But like I know, like I plan things so that I know like how to pace myself. Because I'm a person that lives with anxiety. Like I do an hour in the morning and then I make my partner stop me in the evening at like certain times because I know I'll just keep going. It's always running in my head. Like it doesn't stop, but like I try to set boundaries for myself with the idea that like, okay, I'm working on this right now. I will do this until this time. Like on like this week, like I'm off for holiday. So I'll dedicate like maybe 3 hours, not 1 hour. And like having those, I guess, like road like blocks and like having those like signs in the distance help guide my productivity, because having just 1 hour every day in the morning, it's not enough. But knowing that like I will have more time in the future, or in 2 weeks, I plan to take a full day to do this, or this is a Saturday, I'm going to work on this. It's almost like bargaining with yourself. So like I'm very attuned to like, especially with creative output, if I don't get good sleep, if I don't eat well, if I'm like worried about work, like you just don't perform. Like your creativity is in no way optimal. So even though I'm working on my project, like my creative project, if I push the boundaries I create, it ends up having a lower creative output in the long term.
Okay.
So like,
so you're really thinking long term wise.
Oh yeah. Like,
that's my problem. It's just like, if I'm like, oh, I need sleep, whatever, like I just get into these like situations of like, oh, I'm like doing this right now, I just gotta like get it over with. And then if I push it a day, like that just like, it's like a chain reaction of like, oh, like what the fuck, like I'm not getting it done, I just keep pushing it for the next day, like what's going on, you know? Well, but I guess like time blocking works, but it's also like big picture prioritization, because like you've got to be looking long term, looking at the macro of everything.
Like you've also got to be able to set those like emotional boundaries with yourself, because like there is time blocking and there is like time management, but like when you're a creative person, that burnout is so real. Like what you're talking about is so real, and the way you maintain that isn't necessarily just through how you measure your time. It's like how you measure like your mental sanity, how you measure how alert and awake you are and ready to contribute. Like,
and there's also the other aspect of like you knowing yourself really well and being able to like trick yourself into believing certain things. That's like a big problem of mine. I'll just justify things because like I just know what I need to tell myself to justify something.
Well, yeah, it's like, it is like project managing yourself. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You've got to work on like, you've got to work and adjust on timelines based on like what you're working with. And like, I've found that like, just in general, having like mental wellness checks, like with myself, having like regular touch points, whether it be like therapy or journaling or anything like that, is like so essential for me being a creative person. I've set my expectations to, if I want to be an author, if I want to have a best-selling book, like if I want to create an amazing piece of literature, it's essential that I create many bad pieces of literature before that.
I created a lot of bad videos before I was able to edit a nice looking video.
Right. And like, I think so much of what stops creatives is that like idea for perfection.
Yeah.
But what fuels me to get over that is thinking that like, I need, like, it's essential. You need things to go bad. You need things that fail. You need things that like aren't great. Like you need to have bad art. Like you need to make bad art, like at some point in your life, or you'll never make good art.
Even if you think like computer wise, like what a computer would do, it would make a bunch of mistakes and then like be like, okay, this is not working, and then it'll go the other way. Like not
you
to
have
like
such a tech mindset.
Not
it's
to
so
think,
cool.
Not to think like binary. I feel like I don't. I feel like I have a creative mindset, but like I think in a binary way sometimes because I feel like as humans we're just like trying to create like tech that could do what we do, and it always comes down to just like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Well, it's like tech, like art, like anything. It's a representation of what's going on in here, happening outside there. So, I mean, that's like, it is like a pretty ideal metaphor. But yeah, like even with my first book, like I love it. Like I wanted to write something true and I did, and I'm happy about it. And like, I'm going to edit it a bunch of times. Like if I get a literary agent, hopefully I do, if any literary agents see this. But at the same time, like I know it's not going to be my best work. And honestly, I would be really heartbroken if it was. So I went into the book, like I started the project knowing that this probably won't be the best thing I ever do.
Yeah.
And I'm really okay with that because I just want it to be something that I really like. If you are kind of burnt out creatively, but you still want to work on your book, take BuzzFeed quizzes on behalf of your characters as like a way to like still think about it, but like you're not expending as much creative energy. Answer these 7 questions and we'll tell you what food you are. Like, fill out this quiz and we'll find out
okay, so that helps with your character development. But what I'm asking is like, do you use astrology for your character development? Because I know you have a past in like, you're like a pro tarot card reader.
I don't assign them astrological signs.
Not mostly astrological signs, but like just like the character of like an astrologer. You know, like say like I don't know, like a Gemini is like a certain type of person. Like, do you use that for your characters, or is it just like has nothing to do with that kind of stuff? You know what I mean?
I feel like I could. Like the only reason I don't do it.
We also know that like every zodiac has like the same description.
No. But like, I feel like I could if I wanted to. But like, I'm also like an obsessive Easter eggs person.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
Like, if I did that, it would be very intentional because, like, even in my book now, I included so many references to pop culture and, like, my favorite TV shows and, like, my favorite actors or, like, book characters. Like, if I were to do that, it would have to be because of a very specific foreshadowing reason.
Interesting, okay.
Like, I love the movie The Princess Bride. Of course, the love interest that ends up winning the heart of the main character says the phrase, "as you wish," which is, like, the tagline of that entire movie. So like I have like little, it's like my friends, if you know me, there are clues throughout the book that give you hints on what's going on.
Yeah, I feel like that's good also for like just the internet culture of like, oh, what did she mean by this? You know, like,
no, I'm obsessed with that. I will definitely do that if I ever become like big and famous.
Yeah. It's good that you're already incorporating that in your work.
I can't not because it makes it fun for me.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many things that like I love, like, you know, like Gilmore Girls and Charmed and Friends and like all those TV shows that like we grew up watching. So like if I have the opportunity, I'll have like a nod.
Yeah.
Like a little something.
Why not?
Yeah.
Before your corporate life, you
Yes.
were a social media manager, right? For a zodiac?
It
Astrology?
was a psychic. Yes.
It was a psychic. Okay.
And it wasn't my full-time job. It was one of my side jobs. So like when I was in school and I was like working at the alumni center, like writing for all the papers, like working with the woman who gave me a chance and had like the art gallery, she connected me to her client, which was a famous psychic and that really needed social media. So I'd helped with projects like back and forth. And then this was also after I graduated that like we maintained a relationship. So when her business for like her tarot card business started blowing up, and like I love tarot cards, she asked me if I could run it like while I was doing my full-time job. So it was actually a couple summers ago now that like I ended up burning out because it was just so much content to create. But on top of
you
my
were
job,
creating all the content?
Oh yeah. I was writing like for her Instagram and like for like creating her videos and her reels and like her social media. But like all of that was essentially like doing astrology. Like the entire premise of like her social media was full moon is in Gemini today. What does this mean for you? Like what is like going, like the whole social media page was essentially astrological updates.
Were you aware of astrology prior to that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So you already like, you knew what was happening.
I was aware of astrology and I think it's like fun. I love any type of thing that helps you better assess yourself. Like I love like self quizzes, like Myers-Briggs, like any type of
BuzzFeed,
yeah. Like any quizzes that like, I'm like, tell me something about me. Like give me enlightenment. Yeah. But at the same time, like astrology is at that point, it was always something with my friends. I'm like, do we still believe in this ironically? Do we actually put stock into this? And then I started working for her and like doing all of this, all of the connections to astrology, like through the social media and through that writing. And like, I got such a deeper view of that world. And in general, it kind of aligned because I'm a bit witchy. So like in my own personal spiritual practice, like not astrologically witchy, or at least I wasn't. Like I've always been like a little bit more witchy. So studying the full moon and like studying the phases of the zodiac, like it wasn't too far off from my personal interest.
Yeah, because you're just putting spells on everybody, right?
Yes, many hexes. Like witches are just so cool. The concept of witches, the history. I could go on about it forever. I'm going to write tons of books about witches, but I'm not ready to yet because like those books are going to be like I'm going to really want those books to be great.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But yes, I do like my witchcraft.
Is there anything that happened while you had that position that like allowed you to think differently about astrology?
I think about astrology now the way I think about tarot. Like
it's how you interpret it.
It's how you interpret it, but it's also like in anything, like in approaching management and approaching writing, like it's the way that you come into something and the mindset that you have. Like I would never approach astrology as, in the same way with tarot, as something that gives me pure answers. Like if I'm like, what's going to happen tomorrow at like this meeting, or like what's going to happen in my relationship, or like what's going to happen in the world. Like I would never look to astrology and tarot in that way, because that's just not me. And like I know a lot of people do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like I think a lot of people have found truth in that, and that's like totally cool. And I'm sure that there are many people who have a lot of stories about how stars have aligned and that this is like a great source of truth for them. So like I'm not denying that possibility, but for me, I look at it as a way to spark conversations that are deeper than just regular chats. Like
it's like journaling, right? It's like writing your thoughts out on paper, but it gives you like kind of like a starting point.
Like it gives you, like honestly, I think it gives you a language. Like astrology, tarot, even different facets of witchcraft, like the ritual, the performance, like it gives you a language and a form of expression to help formulate your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings. Yeah. And like if I were pulling tarot and I pulled like the Tower card, which obviously is like a card of change, destruction, like
so obvious.
Yeah, like well, like in tarot, like if you read tarot, like the Tower is usually like it can be interpreted as a sign of doom, a sign of change, a shift. But if I were to pull that, I wouldn't necessarily go, oh my God, something terrible is going to happen to me. This is going to be awful.
Yeah.
I would look at that and be like, what needs to be broken down in my life? Like, what am I not seeing about myself that like is destructive? What am I not seeing about like what I'm doing is destructive?
Yeah, you relate it to your like current self.
People open up in like a really real human way that like is hard, like in this kind of information age, in the age where everything's a joke, everything's a meme, everything's online, nothing matters, like nothing's real.
Mm-hmm.
What is real? It's hard to feel human. And like it's hard to, like with AI, with all the technology that we're around, it's hard to really feel like you can be a genuine person without someone making fun of that. Like it's always been hard to be vulnerable, but I feel like it's even harder now when you're in a world that constantly records and keeps track of everything that you do so that you can't make a mistake.
100%. Yeah.
So I feel like, especially like I have a younger brother, and I'm not saying that this is him, but like also just being in social media and seeing the trends of like Gen Z, there's so much pressure on appearance, and like the emergence of TikTok and like that idea of like raw video formats that are unedited was so popular because people crave that realness.
Real. Have you heard of Be Real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's never going to be that way because it's online.
Yeah.
And when you're a teenager, when you're a kid, even though you are creating culture, you're never going to feel comfortable with like who you are 100% because you don't know who that is.
And that almost kind of like, I feel like stunts that whole growth aspect of like when you are always thinking that something's recording you, then that becomes your personality, and then you might just become that. Yeah. So yeah.
And like your whole life, and like this is what I've thought of like as well, because like we grew up with social media. In a way, our whole lives have been performing. Like our whole lives have been recorded. Like I've been terrified like different times, like waking up in the middle of the night, like did I delete all of my Facebook statuses from like 2016?
I just remade it. Like I deleted my Facebook account and made a new one when I went to CEGEP.
I honestly should do that. I tried to pay my brother to like delete all of my like emo poetry off of like terrible decisions I made. But like when you're a kid, like you should be able to make those decisions. You should be able to make.
I'm just happy that like Instagram only like kind of started when I was like finishing high school. Mm-hmm. So like I don't have to go through the whole like mobile social media phase.
Oh no, for sure. And like I don't know, like this brought us off topic, but I mean I think it does connect that like, especially if you're seeing like a resurgence of like tarot on TikTok, like
especially after COVID. Mm-hmm. After the pandemic, everybody started going into like
seeking answers, new age answers. Like it's huge trends. It makes like a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Something I've always been into. Like I remember walking into Urban Outfitters and then like seeing witchcraft books and seeing like tarot books and being like, oh, this is cool now.
It's cool now, yeah.
So I'm not just like the weird kid like with my spell book. Like mm-hmm. I am now the norm. Like weird process for me. But I mean, I attached myself to like the idea of witchcraft and like New Ageism when I was young, when I was in that tumultuous like teenage time of my life, because I wanted answers. I wanted a way to express myself and my spirituality that felt true to me. Mm-hmm. And so I can relate like that if people are looking for that now. But like when I look back on that time, like I clung to those things so strongly because I just wanted to be able to say something when I didn't have a lot of voice and agency.
Yeah.
And like that's what tools like this do. Like it mm-hmm. gives you those opportunities to be vulnerable without sacrificing vulnerability. Like if I like, and I do, and I will, when I pull your tarot cards, like it's going to be like a deep conversation because like cards are like, it's going to reveal something deeply personal about mm-hmm. you.
I'm going to just start crying.
Yeah. Like, well, like, because I'm going to pull a card. Like if I pull like the devil or something like that, or like the lovers or like the fool, mm-hmm. like any one of those cards. I mean, I'm going to need to ask you like, this is what this means. Does this relate to you?
Right.
It's not going to be like, oh, this card is about like, I don't know, having meetings on Mondays mornings. Like, does this relate to you? Like, it's going to be about like.
Were you late for your meeting?
Yeah. like it immediately sparks like a much deeper connection. And like in that environment, like, of course, like, because we're in that kind of exchange, you'll be like, oh, well, yes, like I guess like the Fool card is about like starting a journey and like naivete and like being at the beginning of something.
Right. Yeah.
And then because it's like an accepted practice, you're going to be like, well, I feel like in my life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when else would you say that?
Yeah. You wouldn't think that way otherwise.
Well, like we wouldn't have that kind of conversation.
That too. Yeah.
Because like, it'd be super weird if I started. And I'm like, hey, when's the last time you felt like you started a journey? Like, I was like,
I thought you never asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, wow. Well, on that note, I feel like that's a good way to end it. What do you have coming up? Is there any plans you have for the future?
I've got a lot. I mean, my plans are always shifting. So like, whenever this goes live, who knows what my life will look like. But right now I'm focusing on trying to be a good manager, trying to learn how to communicate and really reach people in like in a very business environment while still maintaining a human way. So like, that's something that's like a huge focus. I'm looking for a literary agent right now. So I'm in a very vulnerable state where I'm pitching my book to a bunch of agents and hoping one of them doesn't hate it and wants to talk to me. So that's like a process that takes months and months and months. So, and like, I know that there's going to be lots of rejection in that process. So I've you're
aware. You're like
primed
ready
myself.
to apply to 100,000.
Exactly. And so I'm writing my second book, which is going to be like, I've kind of mapped like different books to different parts of my life. And so like this book it is more about toxic relationships and like what is healthy love and like what does an imbalance of power do to a relationship. So like that's going to be a heavy focus on my mind for like the next few months. I really want to finish my first draft by the end of spring.
You said that like relates to what's going on in your life right now?
Oh, just like in the past.
Okay.
Like I relate it like if my first book brings me back to like 12-year-old Deanna, like my second book brings me back more to like 16, 17-year-old Deanna.
Yeah.
So like what those, like obviously like we were teenagers. We made choices. I'm using a lot of my experience from that time in my life to like think about kind of my impulsivity, like the different situations I was in, the different people I knew, how they affected me, my expectations of people versus what people were actually like. And like how in so many ways, and I think this happens with teenagers a lot, falling in love with the idea of a person is much more real than falling in love with the actual person. So like,
100%.
That was like, like everyone can relate to that. Yeah. So I've like zeroed in on that for my next book.
I like that a lot because I could relate to that too. So then I'm excited. I'm excited to see.
I mean, if you don't want to read it, that's also fine. It's a very
I'm not good at reading, but if there's like an audiobook, I'll definitely listen to it.
I'll record the entire audiobook just
And if you do an audiobook, you have to read it. It can't just be somebody else reading it for you.
I'm really nervous because like I write adult content.
That's fine. you're gonna read like the
spicy.
The spicy parts,
the word.
And you just like you throw in your little like laughs in there, like
I'll be giggling. Oh my god. Yeah. Oh my god. The thesaurus is like on full blast. Like, as I'm writing things like that. Yeah. But I mean, it's part of life. It's part of love and relationships. But yes, that is.
But yeah, so if you have an audiobook, I'll listen to it.
No problem.
And I also want to just say thank you for coming on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I feel very honored, seeing as I'm not a published artist yet, I guess. And I know that like you've had some really extraordinary guests on this podcast. So I feel really honored to be counted among them.
I appreciate that. And yeah, like I kind of had a little hiatus, but I'm back on it. And I'm going to start recording episodes again.
This is you're going to include that commitment in the recording?
Yeah, I don't know. I would probably just listen to it while I edit and I would just delete it. But yeah, thank you for coming.
Oh, of course. Thank you for having me.